The tropical wave we've been monitoring will begin to move through the Lesser Antilles tomorrow. I'll let you know where it's going from there and just how strong it could get. Your forecast across the Caribbean and the Bahamas starts right now.
This is Meteo Mundo.
Hi friends, Rusty back here at Meteo Mundo. Fantastic to see you on a Monday. Hope you've gotten a nice start to the week. Jam-packed video today, friends, coming up. I'll have all the latest information on this potential tropical development area. We'll look at all the brand new model information, kind of break down how I expect this to play out for the week ahead. We'll look at some of the active weather for today, and I've got your island by island daily rainfall forecast as well. Love to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comments section below what's been going on in your area. Thank you for helping out the Meteo Mundo weather community by doing just that. What do you say we get started right now? Well, first of all, take a look at what's going on this Monday afternoon. Again, the area in orange is the potential development area from the National Hurricane Center. Obviously, the wave itself is still east of the Lesser Antilles. So as I mentioned in yesterday's video, I didn't expect this to actually wrap up with a closed center of circulation before it got through the Lesser Antilles. I want you to notice that this line now goes west through the Lesser Antilles, and the development area doesn't even begin until Puerto Rico. So what this means is we've still got several days to watch this between this X and Puerto Rico to see if it begins to wrap up. But again, this wave will start to impact especially the Leeward Islands starting tomorrow. Now look, I know it doesn't look very impressive on this blend of visible and enhanced satellite imagery for you right now. That's what it looks like there on the water vapor imagery. Again, we still have a lot of drier air wrapping around this. We do have a cluster of thunderstorms to the south and to the west, but at this point in time, it just hasn't been able to kind of develop its own moisture field. We're still getting hit hard here by the Saharan dust and just the drier air in general in the western Atlantic, which is one reason why the Hurricane Center now agrees and says, look, it's going to take some time, if this is even going to wrap up, to become a tropical depression, and that's not going to happen as it moves through the Lesser Antilles. Let's talk about how far we are away. We're going to go from the Antigua-Barbuda area because that's the area on that line that could be impacted first. We're still about 950 miles away. That's more than 1,500 kilometers, okay? We'll start to see the beginnings of this wave, and again, it's not even an invest, it's not even a disturbance, begin to move through this area starting tomorrow. It'll kick up the sea conditions, we're going to have more rain, and then especially on Wednesday and into Thursday. The numbers that you see are actually the wind gusts already, and ahead of this, and with some of the Saharan dust mixed in, we've had some relatively windy conditions. Now down to the Windward Islands today, we've had a few showers pass its way through Barbados, Trinidad, Tobago, with an opportunity for a passing shower. Nothing very prominent, but a couple of lightning strikes and some good downpours. It's been mainly dry in places like Martinique, Dominica, Montserrat, Guadeloupe. We'll take a look at the feels like temperatures in these areas. That's the numbers there that you see in red. And right now they're running in the upper 90s to a few spots right around 100. So it's not outrageously hot for today. The wind is helping things out, but again, the haze is another big factor. Now we start to get into a little bit hotter weather for us here. I'm just going to drop off real quickly this formation zone. And from Road Town to St. Thomas, St. Croix, now your feels like temperatures getting up to 105. We've seen a few storms develop here on the western sides of Puerto Rico, Aguadilla on over towards Mayaguez, Isabela, Arecibo, trying to get a few showers near San Juan. So we've had a couple of rogue storms develop with the haze for today. It's still been relatively dry through Hispaniola. Look at Santo Domingo there, right around 107 for feels like temperature. Puerto Plata in at 104. Pretty rough conditions here. And again, the haze is a big factor in this area. We've seen some moisture coming back over Jamaica right now. Nice little cluster of thunderstorms at the hour right over places like Maypen, Mandeville, just to the north of Hayes. So kind of the south central part of the island. No rain still in Kingston. Feels like temperature of 110. That's 43 degrees Celsius, okay? 102's right around 40 degrees Celsius. So extremely hot feels like temperatures. Storms are beginning to ramp up though in the south central part of the island. The opportunity for some more. We're still dry in the Cayman Islands right now. Grand Cayman's feels like temperatures in at 111. Storms have yet to develop so far in Cuba for today, but later in the afternoon hours, I expect them to get going. But so far, we've been dry there. Turks and Caicos, feels like temperature there. Cockburtown, 110. Again, that's 43 degrees Celsius. We've actually been dry, generally speaking, today through the central and the southeast Bahamas, getting a few storms to fire up the hour right over the Andros area and Nassau, New Providence. Really hefty storms down in South Florida. Let's drop off the satellite data, bring on the radar data at the hour for you here. Loop that up as well. And again, you can see that the storms are isolated in the Bahamas. They're mainly over South Florida at the hour. I'll put this into motion. You can see some of the storms redeveloping over Bimini. Same thing for Grand Bahama, Walker's Key, Abaco, but they've been really spotty for today, and even not a lot of rain as well. Trying to get a storm, trying to develop right over the New Providence area and Nassau at the hour, but it's been pretty darn hot there at the airport. They've had a feels like temperature of right around 100 degrees. So a lot of those storms are mainly off towards the west. We'll go back over to the satellite imagery for you here. And again, I do have a little bit of a bad frame sequence I have to make sure I knock out here. It's one reason why I'm not looping this data right now. Again, it's hot. It's dry. Cancun, Cozumel, 111. So we're talking about low 40s in Celsius for feels like numbers. I mentioned how it's going to be a little bit drier in Belize, and we've had a few showers here and there, but it's been mainly dry. We got to get back down towards the interior sections of Guatemala and El Salvador. And then as you get into portions of Honduras and Nicaragua, nice little blow up of storms there. But even overall, Central America is a little bit drier for today. So this is kind of what it looks like at the hour for us here, okay? And obviously, we have a couple of pockets of some heavier rain, like in Jamaica and down in the Windward Islands, but the Saharan dust is playing a big factor out ahead of our tropical wave. So speaking of the Saharan dust, again, this is the big perspective here. You're looking from the west coast of Africa all the way through the main development region of the Atlantic and into the Caribbean. I want you to notice as this loops through, if you look at the top right-hand side of your screen, the time, that again, we have this main plume of Sahara dust coming through the Caribbean right now, and then the next couple of plumes that come off the African coastline just simply aren't as prominent. They're going to disperse quicker. They're not going to be as concentrated. This is one of the big pattern flips that the models, especially the European model, has been picking up on to allow for the opportunity for more tropical development in the Atlantic because of the limited Saharan dust. This has really been a limiting factor over the last several weeks. If this begins to abate or dissipate in general, then we could really flip the switch to a more active pattern, and the models are beginning to turn into that. It really just depends on the model and how quickly it actually develops. Some of them have it developing in the next few days, some of them in a week or so down the road. Friends, as we get into the forecast portion of this video, again, I really appreciate you guys liking this video. Thank you so much for that support. If you haven't become a subscriber to Meteo Mundo and you want your latest forecasts across the Caribbean and the Bahamas, and of course these tropical updates as well, thank you for subscribing, sharing with your friends, and I really appreciate all the support here via our memberships, our super thanks, the PayPal and Venmo that you find in the description below as well. So again, taking a look at what's happening with this wave right now, I'm going to jump back over to here. I'm going to pause this real quickly because again, we have one bad frame. So the first thing I want to talk about again is this is the potential development region from the Hurricane Center. It's a 50% chance. Now the wave is obviously not there yet. That's why we have this line. So the X marks the spot where the wave is. We're not expecting it to develop as it moves through the Leeward Islands late tomorrow and on Wednesday, but it could pass right over places like Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, Saba, St. Eustatius, St. Martin, St. Bartholomew, all of these areas here, Guadeloupe, Montserrat, Dominica will all have direct impacts. It will then track basically over the U.S. and British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. From there, we really start to see a divergence in the models, and we'll talk about that coming up. But most of them track it right into this area as we get into Thursday. So let's now talk about the models. Here is the European model. Again, the European model has been much more bullish on development. I will say this, the European model has now been very consistent at where it has this trying to develop as we get into the weekend and early next week. So as we move into the weekend, potential development in the far northern Bahamas. But I want you to notice that it takes a lot of time before we actually get a close center of circulation and a tropical depression or even a weak tropical storm. The European model, at least this deterministic one, is not very strong, but this would obviously be kind of a squally, wet weekend for the Turks and Caicos into the Bahamas. And then on Sunday, maybe on the far northwest side of the Bahamas, we get a wrapped up low, or even farther north. And then this heads up towards the Carolinas, but as a very weak system. Here's the GFS model. I'm running it a little bit faster. Friends, I want you to look into the Gulf of Mexico. You notice not much is happening until Wednesday of next week. That's right. The latest model run of the GFS basically meanders this low into the Gulf of Mexico for about 3 or 4 days, and then finally tries to push it on shore near New Orleans, Louisiana, or Biloxi, Mississippi. This is Friday, okay? The 9th of August. That's how far down the road we are talking about. We'll see if it's that slow, but the GFS model has been very erratic with its solutions. We know that. It's been farther west than the European model, but very erratic with its solutions. That's just the latest run to show you guys. Now, the European ensemble members, again, are more clustered east of Florida, through the Bahamas. But I want you to notice, and again, there's 51 ensemble members. So we're looking at how many plots of actual areas of low pressure do we see. Those are highlighted by the greens, and of course our pressures, and then the L's for the areas of low pressure. I want you to notice that more of them are beginning to develop this system even north and east of the Bahamas. Okay, so now this recurve on the European model is even more prominent. Maybe we do get a storm, but maybe it's even east of the Northwest Bahamas, or east of the Bahamas in general. Obviously, some of them still hug the coastline of Florida, but I want you to notice how clustered these are, relatively speaking. We don't see a lot of the ensembles try and pull it farther off towards the west like the GFS does. So, friends, there is still a huge split in our two global models between the European model and the GFS. The European model is more bullish on developing a system quicker through the Turks and Caicos, Bahamas, depending on, again, which one you're looking at as far as wrapped up, but most of them don't really get it going until it's north of the Bahamas. And then the GFS, deterministic is in the Gulf of Mexico. The other ensemble members that are running, and again, we could see 50 different plots here. What do we see out of the GFS? We see one lowly one here taking the European track and trying to kind of move it up through the Bahamas and again into the Carolinas as we get into early next week. So it's faster than the deterministic, which basically spins this thing for several days next week into the Gulf of Mexico. But otherwise, again, this would be a late weekend and early next week situation. So we're still looking at maybe 7 days out here on the GFS. But obviously the GFS is extremely erratic. Now we can take a look at a couple of different things here on my weather system. I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to go ahead and drop off this potential development region. We'll look at the reflectivity run of the GFS. So it's going to be the same model that I just showed you here, the GFS model. And then we're going to go ahead and let me take this. I got to take this all the way out to the 5th because that's how far out in time that the GFS model begins to actually bring this into Louisiana in Mississippi. Are you getting the idea that we don't have a lot more answers for today? I think that's one nugget I want to pass along, right? There's not a lot to glean from the models over the past 24 hours. We can say that the European model has been more consistent in developing a system and in on its track, and then the GFS model has just been all over the place. The other models are, again, like the ICON model, a little bit more bullish in the Gulf of Mexico, but there's still not a lot of consistency with the other models besides the European model. So here we go, guys. And again, we're talking about swinging this thing all the way into early next week. This is the GFS model. Here it finally comes as we get to the 5th. There is your very weak wrap up there, right there into the 5th. That's how long it's going to take. Now ahead of it, obviously, it's still going to have some impacts for the Lesser Antilles and Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, the Turks, the Caicos, and Jamaica and Cuba and the Cayman Islands. It's just not going to wrap up into a tropical depression. And behind that, that is not part of the system. That's just more moisture coming back in. Look, we should start to expect a more active August, regardless of whether we're going to wrap this system up into a tropical depression or storm. We're just going to see more moisture coming back into play. But the GFS model is extremely slow and extremely erratic. And again, up into the north central Gulf of Mexico, but not until, August 4th, August 5th. So as we get into early again next week. So 7-8 days out. Let's take a look at the wind field here on the GFS model. I'm going to swing that into motion. So this is going to be your surface winds. And again, I've mentioned this several times. We're still going to have strong easterlies coming out of this, okay? 20, 25. 30 miles an hour with some higher gusts. The GFS model does pull the system right over Hispaniola and Cuba. You're not going to develop a system right over those islands. The European model is farther north into the Turks and the Caicos and into the open waters. So that's one reason why the GFS is weaker, because it's going over a lot more island mass, guys. It's going over the Dominican Republic and Haiti and Cuba as it moves towards the west. And then again, eventually right at the end, here comes that, look right up here, guys. I'll zoom in just a little bit more. There's your trying to spin up right at the very end. But again, even now, and then looking at the wind field, go back here. These are still relatively weak winds. This might be a tropical depression at most. So obviously the GFS model is not extremely robust. How about the NAM model? Let's take a look at the NAM. We've looked at the European model, the GFS. We'll take a look at the NAM model for you guys here as well. I'm going to start off with the reflectivity, actually. And again, I feel like the NAM model has done fairly well with these last tropical waves. Again, let me drop off the development region. I absolutely agree with the NAM model in this display. This is going to take us basically through Thursday. You can see the wet weather is going to really impact the Lesser Antilles north of Martinique. St. Lucia south will not have direct impacts, okay? Still going to kick up the wind, but as far as this actual disturbance coming through, it's Martinique, Dominica north, Guadeloupe, Montserrat, Antigua, Barbuda, Anguilla, St. Kitts and Nevis, areas like that. That pushes off towards the west relatively quickly. So as we get into our Wednesday, it's going to be, late Wednesday and Thursday, it's going to be the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and into the Turks and the Caicos. Now the NAM model again keeps the core of the storm near Hispaniola, where it doesn't try and wrap it up either, okay? It's a little bit more robust than the GFS. The NAM is kind of in the middle as far as, hey, are we going to really try and develop something by the end of the week? The NAM is kind of in the middle. The European model is more aggressive. The GFS model is a little bit weaker. But again, do we have a lot more for me to sit here and say, guys, this is what I fully expect? No, as far as development. Now, as far as rain and what this is going to do between now and Thursday, yes. I think all of these areas are going to be impacted fairly significantly by some widespread heavy rain, gusty winds, elevated sea conditions as well. But as far as spinning up an actual area of low pressure, I just don't think we have a lot more answers for you compared to what we had yesterday, okay? The models, again, continue to not be extremely in agreement with any of this, to be quite honest. And the drier air from the Saharan dust is a big factor. The GFS just simply has drier conditions and a hard time developing a moisture field around that tropical wave, where the European model disperses that Saharan dust a little bit quicker. And again, the NAM model in general is kind of in between. Just notice the purples that you see there. You get to the purples and towards the whites, you're looking at some strong winds here, 20, 25, 30 miles an hour. And that will be apparent for these islands as this wave comes through. Again, whether it stays a wave, whether it becomes an invest, which is kind of a disturbance and one notch lower than a tropical depression, as we get into late Thursday and early Friday, there's going to be some pretty good winds here on the northern side of Hispaniola, Turks and Caicos, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and into the southeast Bahamas. If we go back here to the end of this, and I query those numbers, you'll see these are going to be just solid, steady winds, upper 20s to 30 miles an hour with some higher gusts. And so that's what we should expect in these areas. So let's kind of talk about this overall. It's still too early to tell the track, the strength, and the impacts, okay? Because the European model has been consistent, showing a better chance, but the GFS model and the other models are still extremely erratic. Ignore all the other noise, and what I mean by that, friends, is that if you see on social media, one model run, one particular time frame, one story, right? We still have to look at the whole, especially when we have something that hasn't even developed yet and as dispersed as the models are. There's not a lot to lean on here. I would personally put a little bit more emphasis on the European model just because it's been more consistent. Simple as that. But we'll see how it plays out. We still have some time, and you still have some time to go over your hurricane preps as well. And it's just always a good time to do that, especially as we're talking about the potential for a storm in some of our area. Now, wave height and direction, it's going to be a factor. It's going to be a story for us here as far as the easterlies continuing. So for any boaters, any plans to be out over the next 7 days, you should expect some strong easterly winds. And obviously, it's going to be very dependent on what this wave ends up doing, especially for our friends in the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas. We'll keep a close eye on that for you, I promise. Let's talk about the rain chance, island by island. It is not a 3% chance for tomorrow in the Northwest Bahamas. It is a 30% chance. 40% chance on Wednesday, 30% chance on Thursday. Still relatively isolated or scattered for the Central and Southeast Bahamas through Thursday as well. Turks and Caicos will start to see more rain just on the leading edge of this on Thursday. Cuba should still have high rain chances, relatively localized, but a high chance through Thursday as well. Cayman Islands, decent chance tomorrow, fairly isolated tomorrow, back up to Wednesday, back up to a 40% chance on Thursday. Belize City, after some wet weather, again, will be relatively dry the next few days. Still could see a pop-up shower storm across the area, 50% chance on Thursday. We're looking at isolated showers and storms in Cancun and Cozumel. Again, just like I did yesterday, if you see your island in a yellow box, these are the days and the islands I expect this wave to directly impact you. Again, not meaning that it is going to bring even tropical depression conditions, but a tropical wave with passing showers and storms and gusty winds will be directly impacting these areas. Jamaica, not yet. 30% chance the next few days, 40% chance on Thursday. Dominican Republic, still relatively dry tomorrow. 60% chance on Wednesday. Then we see the direct impacts from this on Thursday. Puerto Rico will start to see the direct impacts for Wednesday. Same thing for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. Very wet forecast there, Wednesday and Thursday, both locations. Bermuda has a 50% chance tomorrow, then drier Wednesday, Thursday. Anguilla, a 50% chance tomorrow. It's kind of very late tomorrow, but mostly Wednesday that this directly impacts places like Anguilla and St. Kitts and Nevis. And then on the early part of Thursday, it begins to pull away. Antigua and Barbuda, more direct impacts late tomorrow and on Wednesday, drying out quickly on Thursday. Montserrat, Guadeloupe, Dominica, Martinique will all see the leading edge of this very late tomorrow. And then more direct impacts for Montserrat and Guadeloupe areas north on Wednesday. But that being said, still good rain chances for Dominica and Martinique on Wednesday. And then everyone again dries out on Thursday. St. Lucia and South, no direct impacts, but again, passing showers, storms, elevated sea conditions, lower rain chance overall in these areas. Same thing for our friends in Barbados, but again, can't rule out some rain. And some of you have said, Rusty, it's been extremely hot in these areas. We could use some of that rain. You're going to get that opportunity, right? Grenada, same situation. Trinidad and Tobago, scattered showers tomorrow, more isolated Wednesday, Thursday. Suriname, Guyana, decent rain chances over the next several days. Nueva Esparta's best chance is tomorrow, then slightly drier. And our friends in the ABC Islands could catch a few showers. But again, a lot of that quality of moisture is a little bit farther up to the north. Speaking of rainfall, here's the European model over the next 7 days. This is in inches, but again, easy to go to millimeters. 1 inch is 25 millimeters. So we start to see 4 inches of rain there in portions of the Bahamas and the Turks and the Caicos. You get to about 100 millimeters of rain. Again, the European model is the one that tracks the system through the Turks and Caicos into the Bahamas, recurving across the United States East Coast. So obviously it's going to be wetter on the European model here and then drier into the Gulf of Mexico. Now the GFS model would have wetter weather here. Still some heavier rain likely for Cuba, Jamaica, maybe the Cayman Islands, then, again, spotty but still heavier downpours are likely in Hispaniola and Puerto Rico through the Leeward Islands, a little bit drier towards the Windward Islands, and we can still see some decent rainfall for Central America. It'll be a little bit more dependent, slightly farther off towards the south. Again, the Yucatan here on both the European and the GFS models will be relatively dry, more isolated showers and storms. Friends, you can find me across all social media, Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook. Send me a picture or video, myMediaMundo@gmail.com. Again, you have a specific question about the forecast, feel free to drop it in the comment section below. I'm happy to answer that while you're down there. Thank you again very much for liking this video and subscribing. That's the situation. It is still watch and wait with this disturbance. If it does even form, and where it's going to be going. The models still don't have a great handle on it for us here. That's the latest information and my interpretation of it. I'll have the latest for you tomorrow. So thank you again for liking and subscribing. And I will see you on our Tuesday with the latest across the Caribbean and the Bahamas for you right here at Meteo Mundo.